everybody, round 3 action. We've got 2 undefeated players for you here. On the left is Rick Pittman. He's piloting Mono Blue Devotion, which is his deck of the season. A couple weekends ago, playing in the Comic Town PTQ in Columbus, he finished 11th out of 330 plus players. Last week at the West Virginia PTQ, he finished 11th of 99 players, so he's got the 11th place locked up. He's running really good at that. And he's 2-0 tonight on the night, playing a stock blue list. Oh no, I think he splashes white for Detention Sphere. I think that's his secret tech. And then, of course, on the right is Jonathan Wright, who's piloting his trusty blue-white control deck, coming off a top 4 finish at last week's West Virginia PTQ. So a couple of accomplished players here. Not a surprise that they're both 2-0 on the night. We've got Rick landing a turn 2 Frostburn Weird and serving in. Pumping it to the max here, so short on business. I guess he's got a hand that's all reactive, rifts, and 4-cost mana Master of Ways, perhaps. So Jonathan finding his 4th land. It's a Mutavault. This is the same deck, almost verbatim, that Scotty Wright won with last round on camera. And Rick is just on the Frostburn Weird beatdown plan here. He's got Jonathan all the way down to 12 with just one 1/4 creature. What was the...
what was it? No, can't distill it.
Talking about the chemical leak? I don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, but they said they can't treat it after it's already in the water based on the specific chemical. But enough about chemicals. So a last breath, taking out the Frostburn Weird. Rick tapped out so he couldn't activate it to get it above the 2 power threshold. Rick just quickly replaces it, plays his 5th land, and casts a 2nd Frostburn Weird. This deck is one that can win on turn 4 or 5. I don't know if he can win on turn 4, actually, but he can definitely win on turn 5. And he has played 2 Frostburn Weirds. So not the draw that Rick would have liked, I think, if he had to draw it up, but such are the perils of Magic. There's a D-Sphere going to take out the Frostburn Weird, and I'm sure Rick is fine with that. I think he's got to be thrilled. Well, his hand is now... he just drew an island off the top. He has a Nykthos. And there's a Tidebinder Mage. We were talking about this earlier when Drew Sure was here during the round 1. During round 1, as he was the round 1 buy, I should say. There's a lot of bad cards being played in Standard right now. The Devotion mechanic specifically means you have to play a lot of cards that aren't very good. Tidebinder Mage amongst the chief amongst them. In the decks where you can play it on turn 2 and tap down their Elvish Mystic, it's great. Everything else is garbage. It's just a Grizzly Bear. But that's the sacrifices you make so that you can activate Thassa and activate Nykthos. So Jonathan's going to cast a Divination here. He finds a Guild Gate, passes back with 3 mana open, more importantly passes back with Dissolve mana open. And Rick draws, I think, another Nykthos. So here comes a Nightveil Spectre. Let's see if that resolves or not. It does resolve, and this Tidebinder is going to serve in for 2. Knocking Jonathan down to 10. Of course, the mono blue deck has no reach in terms of direct damage. It's got to do all of its damage through the attack step. So Jonathan is relatively fine with going down to a low life total. There's a Verdict that's going to clear out both the threats. Not sure if Jonathan just drew that or if he's just been sandbagging it, as my life counter seems to be on its last leg up there. And there's another Lonely Grizzly Bear. I cannot make out what the last 2 cards are in Rick's hand. I would love to know. He has drawn basically every land in his deck, which is in some ways even worse than being mana screwed. There's obviously, it's very frustrating to have cards in your hand that you can't cast, but it's just as frustrating to have all the mana in the world to do something and not draw anything worth doing. So Jonathan at the point where he feels like he needs to one-for-one Supreme Verdicts for Tidebinder mages, but if Rick's just going to keep drawing islands, then I guess it really doesn't matter. So some very awkward draws out of both decks. Another island. This is brutal. The longer the game goes, obviously, the happier Jonathan's going to be. He's already resolved one divination. He's only cast 4 spells this whole game. We're going to see an Elspeth here, and that's probably going to be game over, as Rick's deck can put on a lot of pressure, but it definitely struggles to catch up when it is far, far behind. He does have a Mutavault on board, so he can basically activate Abyss mode and force Jonathan to jump with one of those tokens every turn. And see that the Cloudfin Raptor. Now, this whole deck has got some really good cards like Master of Waves and Thassa, but in order to play them, you have to play garbage cards like Cloudfin Raptor and Tidebinder Mage.
You gotta hope for the opposite that he drew. You're wanting Cloudfin, Tidebinder, Nightveil instead of...
All of these cards are great to draw, just not in the order in which Rick has drawn them. You don't usually want to draw 14 islands before the Cloudfin Raptor. But what can you do? You can just play the cards that come off the top, right? I'm sure when he kept his opening 7, it was worth keeping, and then it turned into this monstrosity. And he draws a Judge's Familiar. Again, another card I would argue, not the best card in the format, but at least it's going to evolve his Cloudfin Raptor.
Flying him in with a Force Spike.
So Rick is all in, hellbent now, serving in for 1 with his Cloudfin Raptor. We're going to cycle a Quicken here. And then Supreme Verdict. Oh my goodness. Jonathan is going for style points here. Quicken into Supreme Verdict. Clears out all of his own soldier tokens. Don't know why he has yet to... there we go.
I don't think I've seen any answering his question.
Question in the chat, is anyone wanting black or green? I think Brandon Hart might be playing Jund mid-range, but I don't think anyone is playing just black-green. So cycle another divination here. We're going to tick up our Elspeth. Elspeth ultimate's at 7, right?
Yes. It's our next turn.
Well, he's going to tick it up again and then ultimate. So there's Thassa, a little bit too late, and it's going to meet an Essence Scatter. It is always a creature when it is on the stack, even though it wouldn't be when it comes into play. No, Jonathan's just living the dream here. He's going to go ahead and ultimate his Elspeth, likely has another in hand. Going to open up his Mutavault here and attack for 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Drop Rick down to 6. And unless Rick draws a Cyclonic Rift, this game is over. And even if he does draw a Cyclonic Rift, this game is probably over because Jonathan has 1,000 cards in his hand. And there we go. So Rick shows that he has the skills needed to draw every land in his deck. It's unfortunate to see. 70 degrees and a per diem. So. Alright, so Rick's on the play here. Down a game to Jonathan's blue-white control deck, having drawn a large number of lands in Game 1, really not getting anything going. Here in Game 2, off to a better start with turn 2 Frostburn Weird. Well, I shouldn't say better start. He had 2 copies of Frostburn Weird in the first game. It's just that's all he had. And Jonathan felt comfortable going all the way down to 10 before he Supreme Verdict 1-for-1'd it. So no turn 2 play from Jonathan. Interesting here, he likely doesn't have Last Breath, or he's holding up Syncopate to try and take out a Thassa, because he could Last Breath while Rick is tapped out to get rid of the Frostburn Weird. So are we going to be able to Essence Scatter? Nope, it's a Gainsay, even better. So that one seemed like it was inevitable. It wasn't exactly... I was a little bit surprised to see Gainsay, as I forgot that's the very popular sideboard card in this matchup, as well as Control Mirrors. But it felt like that Thassa was going to get counterspelled. That's the best way to answer the gods. Gods are very difficult to get rid of once they're on board, but they are very easy to get rid of on the stack. So Rick serving in here, and we're going to pump with everything. There's an opportunity at this point, too, to completely blow Rick out. Well, I guess not. I guess you would have to get really technical, but if you activate it all in response to themselves, in response to the last one, you can last breath, but I don't think we'd play that hardcore here at the FNM level. Jonathan content just to play draw go here. Serves in no blocks. Going to pump for the full 4, so Jonathan down to 11, and Rick just passes back. So again, his draw seems to be very reactive or land heavy here. His Thassa getting caught by a Gainsay early. And Jonathan content to just take damage from the Frostburn Weird. So Jonathan's got a thinker here. I'm not sure exactly what he could be debating. I see a Sphinx's Rev in his hand. Looks like he's missing a land drop here. So he's just going to use this opportunity to go ahead and clear. No, he's not missing a land drop. He's just choosing to clear out the Frostburn Weird, tapping down, or tapping out. So Rick has free reign here. We're going to see a Thassa or a Nightveil Spectre. Judge's Familiar into a Tidebinder Mage. So Jonathan's going to be pretty happy with that turn of events, as Rick really didn't do much with the turn he had.
And the board states have definitely been atypical in this matchup.
Yeah, it's not... We've seen Jonathan take a lot of damage from creatures, really only removing them with Supreme Verdict. And then Rick has drawn the often ineffective portion of his deck. No Master of Waves, only one Thassa which got counterspelled. Just some mostly irrelevant small creatures at the time that he played them. But they still attacked for damage. Jonathan's down to 8 here, and there's a Nightveil Spectre. So is that going to meet a Dissolve or another counterspell? There is a Dissolve. And Dissolve effectively forcing an edict from the Judge's Familiar, as Rick chooses to sack it to keep his Nightveil Spectre around. So interesting there. I don't know if Jonathan saw that or he just chose to cash in his counterspell that way. I would say he likely missed that, because I don't know if you really want to trade Dissolve for Judge's Familiar.
Considering he can utilize the card's top deck with Nightveil.
Yes. We're going to see another Verdict here, or we're going to see Jace AOT. It is, in fact, Jace Architect of Thought. That's going to meet a Gainsay. It better, because there's a negate. If Rick wasn't going to counterspell, then want to make sure not to reach for your mana, because then your cover is blown, so to speak. But Jonathan content to let Jace hit the bin, and then resolves a D-Sphere on the Nightveil Spectre. And there is a Master of Waves just for 3 tokens, but that's going to be plenty enough with the way the game is working out now. Rick rocking his custom... Rick very proud of the tokens he makes. He donated some elemental tokens for Voice of Resurgence to the stream earlier tonight. He's rocking some floating polar bear elemental tokens. I don't know what it's about, but I like it. So D-Sphere up on 2 is going to take out the Tidebinder Mage this turn. It's going to be too late. It's going to be too late. Jonathan will be well and dead before the Master Waves can get taken out. Going to go ahead and resolve a Sphinx's Revelation for 4. Is that correct? But I think he had to shock himself to do it. So at 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So Jonathan will go down to 2 as it stands. There's a Bident of Thassa. So Jonathan's still not dead, but Rick is going to draw a lot of cards here. He's going to draw 4 cards off the Bident. Sacking the Ratchet Bomb, taking out the Tidebinder Mage, taking 8 damage, going down to 2, but more importantly, Rick loading up his hand with 4 cards as 4 creatures connect. There's another land. It's a Mutavault, so Jonathan in desperate shape here. He needs a removal spell for the Master or a Sweeper. He also needs an answer to the Mutavault. He has drawn a Mutavault, so it looks like he's in pretty good shape here. Question in the chat, how many players we have tonight? We have 17. Not as many as we would like, but again, there were some extenuating circumstances in the region today, so a lot of people have some more important things to take care of. So serving in with the team again, here's the Quicken. Quicken's going to meet a negate. Johnson's going to need to counter back. He does have mana to counter back and then Verdict, so dissolve on the negate. Scry. Leave it on top. So Quicken resolves. You draw the card off Quicken, which we know what it is because he just scryed it. And Supreme Verdict. Did he have another Verdict in his hand? Oh, I need to look in his hand, because if he didn't, that was the greatest thing I've ever seen. He didn't. He didn't. Oh, okay. Alright, so that was fun. I did get confirmation from a standard by that he drew a Revelation. That's why it looked like a Verdict.
Oh, okay. Still would have been an amazing top deck.
Yeah, still pretty good. Having to fight the Quicken in order to resolve the Supreme Verdict. But now casting a Sphinx's Revelation for 6, going back up to 8. Well, Rick is tapped relatively low here. 7 cards in hand exactly. Rick left with a Bident and a Night Veil Spectre. He's also got a Mutavault, so he can get in for 4 here. Draw 2 cards and half Jonathan's life total. There's a Last Breath, which is actually really important because Rick splashes white for Detention Spheres. He's going to be able to cast that Last Breath on a Mutavault. Rick plays his land for turn, correctly waiting until after the Night Veil to do so. And now passes back with, I think, just 2 cards in his hand. Jonathan with a ton of mana here. Let's see if something's going to resolve. No, I apologize. Rick has a whole grip. Looks like 5 cards, having drawn a lot of cards off that Bident. Bident, a card that's at the Pro Tour when the Mono Blue deck made its debut. People couldn't really decide on how many to play. Some played none in the main, 1 in the main, 3 in the main, some in the sideboard. But regardless, an amazing card in this matchup as it gives the Mono Blue deck a lot of resources against the grindy control decks. So there's a Last Breath on the Night Veil Spectre, having already resolved Jace AOT. That resolves. Rick's going to go up to 24 off the Last Breath. And more importantly, no longer going to have access to the Last Breath that he stole with the Night Veil Spectre. So Jonathan is going to be able to activate his Mutavault, and because of the Jace trigger, he's going to be able to effectively blank Rick's Mutavault. So Rick's not going to be able to draw a card this turn. 3 mana for Thassa? There's a D-Sphere. Likely targeting the Jace. Of course, you don't have to say that until the card resolves. Jonathan deciding if he wants to fight over this. Looks like it's going to meet a dissolve. Let's see if Rick has a counterspell. He would have needed to have just drawn it because he likely would have countered the last breath last turn. So D-Sphere hits the bend, dissolve, scries one to the bottom. Four mana for a Master of Waves. Going to be good for 3 tokens here. Passes back. So Rick tapped relatively low. We know he likely doesn't have a counterspell, as he probably would have fought over the last couple of spells. If not, he's been sandbagging the gate very well and will likely deserve the element of surprise that he gets should he have it in his hand. So Jonathan plays another Plains. Chat correctly pointing out you don't have to name the target of the D-Sphere, which is mostly irrelevant in this state, as it's either the Jace of his opponent or his own Bident. So, touche there. There's a Sphinx's Revelation. So Rick was in fact not bluffing the negate, or sandbagging the gate, I should say. Would have been a great play had he saved that. Of course, Jonathan leaving up 3 mana just so he could dissolve in response. We're going to go ahead and tick up Jace. Oh, we're changing our mind, maybe. Nope, we're going to tick up the Jace here. Jace might gain him some life here. So we still have dissolve mana up. Jonathan's going to enter his discard phase.
He also runs it for root-borne defenses.
Yeah, in the sideboard, you're exactly right. Yep. Rick has 2 D-Spheres in the main with his white mana, and then I think 2 copies of root-borne defenses in the sideboard, which you'd probably want in this spot as you're playing against the Verdict deck. So it looks like he's got another D-Sphere in his hand. I think he's baiting with the Thassa here. Baiting with Thassa. If you're Jonathan, you can't let it resolve. But now the D-Sphere on the Jace is going to hit. D-Sphere on Jace is going to hit. Jonathan tapped out, so we're going to be able to serve in with our Mutavault. So D-Sphere Jace, attack in for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put Jonathan down to 5 and dead on board next turn. More importantly, draw Rick 5 cards. Wow. Biden doing a lot of work here. But these guys are going to be careful, especially Rick. If he, 16 minutes left to go in the round. If he wins this one, he's going to need to make sure he leaves himself enough time to win a game 3 here. A draw on this spot is not going to be the worst thing that could happen to these 2 guys, but still feel a lot more comfortable with a win.
Tapped out.
So Rick passes back a fresh hand of business. Let's see what Jonathan's got here. So he's dead on board even with the Jace activation. Rick finding a copy of Nykthos as well, though it's not very good in this spot as it's not gaining any mana.
Tapped out.
Yeah, discussion on the chat about why he would attack with a Mutavault. I think it's pretty clear attack there. There's a divination. Rick going to check his hand. We know he doesn't have a counterspell. And if he does, he's not going to fight the divination. So Jonathan plays his land. How does he dig himself out of this situation? He's going to be careful with time, too. There's an elixir of immortality.
Yep, that's correct. He should be down to 4 instead of 5.
Yep, that is true. Let me tell. We got it. That's a good point.
Good catch.
Well, often, well, you know to look for that interaction with the Mutavault and the Pack-Rat decks.
Right.
That's pretty common, but
not very common to think about with the Master Waves.
But just maybe just I'm personally just a little bit less experienced with that one. So I do want to try to keep things as honest as we can here. Jonathan sticking in Elspeth makes this a lot more difficult for Rick, as he can't really effectively attack with his Master of Wave tokens here. 3 mana for a Detention Sphere. Detention Sphere on the tokens is going to be good enough. If he has a counterspell to back this up, or if Jonathan doesn't have a counterspell, that's going to be the ball game. As even without the Mutavault, Rick can get in with the 4 creatures he has. So D-Sphere on the stack here. I guess Jonathan trying to decide, is Rick going to choose the wrong thing? Nope, he does correctly choose the Soldier tokens. So unless Jonathan has an Azorius Charm, no, he has Elixir up. Yep, exactly right. So now the question becomes, do you serve in and try to kill Elspeth here? I don't think you do, but well, Rick's going to load up his Mutavault and then fire in with everybody here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So he's got 6 damage here. So serving with everything that isn't Master of Waves, playing around Azorius Charm.
Held back the Master, so it's only 5.
Jonathan activates his own Mutavault. And then before damage is going to activate his Elixir. So well played by both sides here. As Jonathan goes up to 10 off the Elixir. Oh, he went to 9.
Was at 4.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I just hadn't updated my life. And then goes back down to 4 off the attacks. Drawing 3 cards off Bindit, one of which is Pithing Needle. That's a very good one here. I assume you name Elspeth. That seems to be the most egregious card.
He only took 4 damage, so he's at 5 again.
Spikemo in the chat. Haven't seen him in a month of Sundays. And for those asking, yes, we did correct the life total discrepancy. Pithing Needle. Asked him what he needled. Just ask Scotty what he... Elspeth. Okay. So, as expected, Pithing Needle naming Elspeth. I mean, really, the only card that's mattered in this matchup so far has been that Bident. Jonathan, like a pro, redrawing his Elixir. Still needs a way to win this game. With that Needle on Elspeth, it's going to be really difficult. There's a Divination. John's going to draw a couple more cards. Time now becoming very much a factor. if there's a discrepancy on life totals, you can't counter this. Oh, what a blowout. Rootborn defenses. All your creatures are indestructible, plus make a token, or populate, I should say. The chat indicating there's still an error with the life totals. Well, I've already gone out there and interrupted them once, so it's going to have to be on them at this point. It is the responsibility of the Mutavault player to know that his Mutavault gets pumped. As much as I would like to correct things, I do not want to interject and ruin somebody's FNM more than I have to. I'm not sure if it's going to matter. The Rootborn defense is going to effectively counterspell that Supreme Verdict. We're going to pump Jace up. Now this attack is lethal, as even with the delayed Jace trigger, if we load up the Mutavault again. And of course, if we ever draw a Cyclonic Rift, though I'm not sure Rick still has him in his deck, to be perfectly honest with you. He has a Thassa in hand. Pre-combat Thassa?
Correct.
So these two guys just throwing haymaker after haymaker here. Looked like Jonathan had stabilized when he landed the Elspeth, but Rick finding a Pithing Needle. So we're making our Master unblockable, which is obviously very important, so that it can't be blocked by the Mutavault. We have managed to make other creatures unblockable here. We make our Mutavault unblockable.
That's fine.
Serve in with everybody. So delayed Jace trigger, they all get -1, -0. Mutavault blocking one of the tokens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to be lethal. And before damage, activate the elixir yet again. So go up to 10. And then take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Back down to 5 should be. And then more importantly, Rick going to draw 4 cards off of his Bident.
Made it unblockable. Yes, they missed that.
No, the chat saying it's risky to attack with Master of Ways, not because he didn't make it unblockable with Thassa, but you can get Azorius Charms, and that is a huge blowout. But I think what Rick is hedging is that Jonathan doesn't have Azorius Charms left in his deck. The same situation appeared earlier in the game, and Jonathan didn't respond with the Azorius Charm. Rick did play around it last time, but with the life totals the way they are, he may have either decided he doesn't have Azorius Charms, I'm not going to play around it anymore, or he's just decided at this point of the game he just wants to force through the damage. But it is interesting. You do definitely open yourself up to a massive blowout with Azorius Charm. So Jonathan's in a real tough spot here. With Thassa on board, she's active currently. No, she's not. I apologize. No, he is because of the D-Sphere. So Thassa's active, plus we have a Nykthos and a million lands, so we can make our entire team unblockable. So what Jonathan needs to do is he needs to get rid of the Master, which will get rid of the tokens. It will turn off Devotion to Blue. Very unlikely that Rick doesn't have another blue permanent that will turn it back on, however. So Jonathan probably just dead on board here. He really needs to start thinking about the timer. Of course, our timer is for entertainment purposes only. It is not the official timer of the round. But it is very late in this round 3 feature match. Yeah, so I guess at this point Jonathan's playing for the tie, or playing for the draw. If you draw in the second game, Jonathan with the win will win this match. But I can guarantee you that Jonathan Wright is not the kind of person that's going to stall out this game to try and win that way. Plus, I don't really know if it matters because Rick may be able to beat him just in turns. So Jonathan choosing to throw the Hail Mary here. He is ultimating Jace. Of course, Jace's ultimate, go get a card out of your opponent's deck and cast it, then get a card out of your deck and cast it. So what does Rick have? D-Sphere? D-Sphere might be good. So what do we get? Master of Waves? Seems good. Slightly off there a little bit with my screen cap. Nailed it. That's not big enough to read, I don't think. So he gets his own Master of Waves and a Supreme Verdict. So he's going to cast Supreme Verdict, which is going to kill the Master and its effective tokens. Then cast Master of Waves, and his own devotion to blue is 1/2 because of a D-Sphere. Have some polar bears, Rick says. And Jonathan still has 1 billion mana here. He's going to scry. I would like to point out to those in the chat that may be indicating that Jonathan's playing at a slow pace. You've never met the Wright brothers. This is the pace of their play on turn 1. So, and obviously, if Jonathan might be able to find a way out of this. He's a very accomplished player, so I'm not going to assume that he's just slow rolling here. Pithing Needle likely naming Thassa. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Activating Nykthos for negate. Floating mana. So the Pithing Needle down. Then Sphinx's Revelation.
Jeez.
For Gainsay. Wait, can he not do it? I don't know what just happened there, I'll be honest with you. I'm gonna go ask him. So, because Jonathan is better at Magic than I am, he moved to his instep. So Rick floated mana off of Nykthos, but then Jonathan moved to instep, then cast the Sphinx's Rev during his instep.
Cleared out the mana pool and couldn't use the floating mana.
Yeah, you have to discard off of that, but you still get to draw the cards and basically leave Rick with only Dispel, which and we know he doesn't have Dispel in this deck, or it's very unlikely that he's going to.
Or what a board state.
Question in the chat, where did Rick get those tokens? He made them. Made them using a printer, some label paper, and Magic Set Editor. So loading up the Mutavault here. So now we see why Rick chose to fight over the Pithing Needle. Making stuff unblockable with his Thassa. Serving in for 7 here, drawing 2 off the Biden. Joe Biden doing some work here. Is Jonathan down to 8? There's another Mutavault. So Jonathan is dead on board here. 2 Mutavaults, a Frostburn Weird, and a Thassa. All going to be unblockable next turn. So we've got to find answers to the creatures as well as the lands. Thassa doing what she does best, at just making it impossible to answer. I'm going to be honest with you, George. Pretty good game of Magic here.
Yeah, it is. I usually don't like control. It's not control. I usually don't like control matchups, but this has been pretty entertaining.
Can you do me a favor and go find out how much time is left in the real clock? Thank you. So Jonathan casts a divination. So there you hear time in the round. So Rick's going to have turn 1 here. Yeah.
Actually, it was 2 minutes past.
Well,
Oops.
47-minute round this time. So Jonathan casts a divination, finds a Mutavault to play. He's on turn 0, so Rick's going to get turn 1 here. So he's going to get the 3 turns. That's going to be incredibly relevant. Question in the chat, has he scryed at all? I assume we're talking about Rick with his Thassa. He's left them all on top. He is resolving that trigger, but I don't think he's sent one to the bottom. So looking with Thassa, there you go, right on cue. It shoves one to the bottom. Probably an island. I think that's the only... I would think Island, Tidebinder Mage, Cloudfin Raptor. Those are the cards that we're sending away at this point. Activate Nykthos for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 mana. So we activate both our Mutavaults, floating 4 mana. No, floating 5 because we're only activating 1. Now floating 6. Making all 3 creatures unblockable. 7, activate another Mutavault. Chaining Nykthos. So 2 more mana. So this, of course, turn 1. And serves in with... He's going to make the other Mutavault unblockable. And serves in with the team here. So we can make that Frostburn Weird 4 power. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 13 damage represented here. So what are our relevant cards here? Quicken into Verdict works.
Other Sphinx.
Quicken into Verdict, yes it does. Yeah, it does work. Sphinx's Revelation works. Azorius Charm works. Last Breath. In Response, Pump. Interesting there. Did Jonathan just miss that? Quicken. So 6 mana activating Nykthos here. We're going to fight over the Quicken? No? We're going to take a long time. So the Quicken is good. So the Quicken is good. There's a Verdict. But in response, are we going to Rootborn Defenses here? Rootborn Defenses.
Wow.
That should be good enough here. Unless Jonathan has another counterspell. We're floating a lot of mana here. Yep, he can't do that. Quicken only works for 1 spell. Dissolve is what Jonathan meant to grab out of his hand. So it goes down to 2. There's a Gainsay on the Dissolve. And Rick gets one of the hardest fought matches that ever ends in a draw. He had to fight his way through a game where he probably drew 20 cards off of that Bident. So we're going to go outside, try to expedite this. We'll be right back with our winning in round 4, last round of Swiss here coming up.